Good afternoon, everybody. We're absolutely delighted to be joined at the forefront today by Rhianna Davis-Smith from Wicked Weather Watch, which is a fantastic charity that we have been involved with at the Fore since autumn 2018, when we gave them some funding to help them build their capacity. Wicked Weather Watch are doing really exciting work addressing the climate crisis by educating children. As we all know, the climate crisis is something that is not going away, but they are working from the ground up and take polar explorers and experts in Arctic science into schools to help raise awareness and at the same time allay eco-anxiety by teaching children what they can do and how they can help. They've worked with over 25,000 pupils so far, but I will let Rhianna tell us a little bit more about it. So Rhianna, do you want to give us a bit of background on how Wicked Weather Watch came about in the first place?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first, I just want to say thank you so much for having me. It's really exciting to speak to everyone. And yeah, so a little bit about Wicked Weather Watch. We started in 2009. We were founded by an Arctic explorer. His name is Sir David Hempelman Adams. And he founded Wicked Weather Watch because he had small children at the time, and they were asking him lots of questions about the difference between global warming and climate change. And he had gone to the Arctic lots of different times as an explorer and witnessed the impacts of climate change up there. So he saw very little sea ice, very little glacial ice as well. And he saw the very drastic impact that climate change is having up in the Arctic. So he created Wicked Weather Watch. And in 2016, we started our education program. So we started going into schools across the Southwest. We are registered technically in Horsham, but we work very much locally in Bath and Bristol, with lots of schools there. But what's really exciting is we've actually expanded to working nationally now. So what we do as a charity is we use the stories of Arctic and Antarctic explorers to talk to primary school children about climate change. And what we do is we essentially empower them to not only take climate action, but also to talk about it with their families, with their teachers, with their classrooms, with their community. And yeah, that's kind of what we do. We offer lots of different sessions. Like Mary Rose said, we've taught 25,000 pupils from over 300 different schools, both locally and nationally now. And we have explorers come in, provide a talk all about how they've witnessed climate change in the Arctic and the Antarctic. And we do lots of really fun interactive workshops with the children to make sure that they've got a really good understanding of the science behind climate change, but also through a really non-daunting and positive way, so that they see climate change as something to be excited about learning about and not scary.
Do you want to give us an example of one of your favourite anecdotes from work that you've been doing in schools with pupils where you have been changing attitudes amongst the children and helping them become little eco-activists?
Oh my goodness. I mean,
taking the message out further.
That's hard to narrow down. I mean, there's been quite a few different times where it's really hit my heart about the work that we do. One of them is just like the thank yous that you get after the session. And when you see that from the children, the light bulb really goes off, and they realize that they can have agency over their future, that they can have a part to play in reducing climate change in any way possible, I think is incredible. But I mean, whether it's schools creating eco groups after we've gone in and spoken to them, or even just I've heard from parents that have come back to us after the sessions and said, my son or daughter had an amazing time and they have not stopped talking to us about the plastic packaging in our supermarket shop, or the fact that we should be growing herbs on our windowsills, all of these different things, which I like to call pester power. It's the ability that children have in their families to really make a difference. So I mean, there's that's just scratching the surface.
I love the fact that you're harnessing pasta power, which is so often seen as a negative thing,
It
to
is,
the good of the world, basically. It's like, it's not about buying me more sweets. It's about, Mum, Dad, let's stop using plastic. That's
well,
really
it's all, everyone really wants to be doing better for the environment. I feel like when you grow up and you become an adult, life just kind of gets in the way. And I think it's nice to have that reminder from the younger generation what our priorities should be in that way. So I think it's a lovely little reminder that maybe does come across a little annoying to parents sometimes, but I think it's important, definitely. It's very powerful, that's for sure.
And also I think adults want to be doing more, but often they don't really know what to do. So having information through their children is really helpful.
Absolutely.
How do you respond when people talk about eco-anxiety and, you know, there's so much on the shoulders of children already, adding to the stresses of life and the fears about the future with teaching them more about climate change? How do you respond to that in terms of actually what you're doing is positive rather
than definitely. It's a real
stress.
it's an interesting one for sure, because what we do at Wicked Weather Watch is we don't necessarily claim to reduce eco-anxiety, but we increase awareness. And what we do is we bring the realistic facts to the children in a really positive way without scaring them. So just for an example, I had a session not long ago, I think it was last year, where I was asking the children, how much do you think that the seas are rising every year because of sea level rise? Just to see what they thought. And this was before I even spoke to them about sea level rise, ice melting, all of that. And I asked them, like, why don't you show me with your hands? Like, how much do you think? And I had some children saying, this much is how much the seas are rising every year. I had children getting on their chairs and all the way to the top, or saying, this is how much the seas are rising. And I explained to them, I said, well, actually, the seas are only rising about this much, the width of my pinky fingernail every year. Now, this is still really important, and it still can have a really drastic impact on our planet. But I think the important thing that we do in our work is we bring them back down to reality a little bit.
Yeah.
So we are giving them the accurate facts.
Yeah.
But I think what often happens is there's a lot of fear mongering. They're not hearing about climate change from an educational perspective. We're usually the first people that have spoken to them in an educational setting. So they're only hearing snippets, either from the parents speaking or on TV, the radio, the news, all of these
TikTok.
things. Exactly. Yeah. So it's kind of bringing them back down to reality, giving them the accurate facts, and with that, showing them what they can do to be better for the environment. So hopefully, definitely not trying to put more pressure on them, but just kind of making sure that what they do know is accurate.
Yeah, education and honesty, but also the tools to make those worst case scenarios impossible, hopefully.
Yeah. Exactly.
And education is power, knowledge is power, and disinformation is the opposite. For you, tell us a little bit about how you got involved and how you came to become the director of Wicked Weather Watch.
So about 4.5 years ago now, I moved to Bath, and it was 2020. It was literally February, end of February 2020, which we all know what that means, what was around the corner. I was unemployed, and I, like everyone else, wasn't expecting a pandemic to hit. So I had just graduated from University of Kent studying wildlife conservation, and I was really, really interested in climate change. And I remember telling myself at the time that my dream job was to be a climate change educator in some way. So I found Wicked Weather Watch, and I asked if I could volunteer my time, because I had a lot of it at that time. And they onboarded me as a volunteer. It was still a very small charity. There were only 2 people working there at the time. And I got to make resources for the website, which was really fun, and I absolutely loved it. And then eventually there was an opportunity. I think someone left, and then I was able to become a schools coordinator. So I was able to do it as a part-time job, which I remember where I was when I got the call and everything. It was pivotal for me. So I did that for about 2 years. And then the charity had like a change of leadership, and the director had to leave quite suddenly. And so because I was in the charity for quite a while at that point, I actually had the most experience working in the charity, and I knew the charity the best. So I took over as director, which was really exciting. You can
I think you're
imagine.
underselling yourself there. I'm sure it was more than just I'd been there the longest. I'm sure that
Well, yeah, I had a
not
real
just the
passion
only
for it.
factor. You clearly were very good.
Well, I mean, since then we've had the highest impact and the highest income for the charity. So I'm grateful to be in it. And honestly, every day I'm just proud to be a part of it. So it's amazing.
But you are now just one full-time employee.
I am. So 2
Yeah.
years ago, it was just myself, and it's been like that since. Not necessarily on purpose, but we've really grown in our volunteers, and we're just trying to get a little bit more funding now to make sure that we can expand, because we've had a lot of demand for the work that we do.
So explain, just to put some numbers on it, exactly how many children you're working with a year, and what's your annual budget these days, just to
so
make it clear how much you're making with very limited resources.
Yeah, definitely. So last year we actually broke a record for the charity for impacting the most amount of children in 1 year, and that was 4,300 in 1 year, which is incredible. And I'm really hoping that this next year is going to be even more than that. We've got lots of really exciting programs coming up. And to put that into perspective, at the moment, our annual budget is about £40,000. So trying to do the most that we can with what we've got. But so far it's working really well. And it just proves, I think, that there's a real demand for the work that we're doing. I mean, we were meant to be a local charity working in person across the Southwest, and post-COVID, we just had so many schools getting in contact with us across the country. And from my point of view, I just didn't want to say no to them. So we created virtual programs, and now we do those nationally, and it's some of our most popular work. So yeah.
And how, in terms of the volunteers you're working with, who are all climate scientists, is it fair to describe them?
Well, they're Arctic and Antarctic explorers.
Oh, okay. And yeah, sorry, and yeah. How, what's the capacity? How many are there? What's the capacity to scale? Because I can imagine that there's a limited number of Antarctic and Arctic explorers in the world, but how many, if you had the funding, how many more programs do you think how many more children do you think you'd be able to reach if you?
I think we could do thousands more every year easily.
There's no shortage then of Antarctic and who want to spread the message.
Yeah. So at the moment, we've got about 15 volunteers that help us with our sessions. A lot of those are Arctic and Antarctic explorers, but like you said, there's very limited amounts of them, rightfully so, because we want these places to be untouched as much as possible. But what we've done to kind of rectify that and ensure that we're having more impact without having to rely on more and more explorers is we've actually promoted virtual events, which are multi-school. So we can get up to 12 schools taking part in one explorer talk. A lot of our explorers are across the country anyway, so it opens up the opportunity for not only more schools to get involved, more children to hear from the explorers, but also it increases our impact, make sure we're having more of an impact, and it reduces the strain on our Arctic and Antarctic explorers. So it means that we need less, which is good, but we can still impact loads and loads of pupils, which is great.
So you've sort of diluted the explorer input without reducing the impact on the children. It's really clever.
Exactly. And it's still like a really nice interactive session that the children really get a lot from. I mean, at the end of the day, what we want is we want children to think about taking climate action, of course, but also to just feel more in tune with nature, feel like they want to go and explore themselves and become adventurers themselves, especially post-COVID. That's really important. And being able to speak to what's essentially kind of like an astronaut, but cooler, because they've explored somewhere that feels like another planet on Earth. Being able to hear from them and see through video or photo what they experienced it's just incredible, and it really means a lot to the children. So yeah, it's wonderful.
So if the number of volunteers and the number of explorers that you have access to isn't a barrier on your expansion and your ability to go out to more schools, is it that the schools, have you got school years? I mean, it sounds like from what you said, you have waiting lists of schools that are coming to you. So is it basically purely funding that is holding you back in terms of your ability to do? And just talk to us a little bit more, if that is it, talk to us a little bit more about the funding landscape for you, because I think a lot of people would assume that there's loads of funding out there for environmental causes, because obviously it's such a big issue. And why do you think that people have that impression if that isn't the case from where you're sitting?
Yeah, so it's multifaceted from my point of view, for sure, just because it's kind of like just a cycle that we end up getting into, because I'm the only employee at the moment. I'm also responsible for coordinating, delivering, and organizing the back end of the charity. So I'm also the lead fundraiser. So I haven't got loads of time to go into fundraising as much
Are
as
you
possible.
doing everything by any chance?
Yes. It's
We
good
had that.
CV, that's for sure. But yeah, so there is funding out there. It's just for smaller charities, it's very hard to expand. So there's a lot of funding for like maybe £500, £1,000 to £2,000. But what I find is that it's a lot of funding goes towards climate action in a different way than what we do. So it's quite difficult to survey the impact that we have. What we are doing is we're raising awareness, which you can survey, which is great, but we're also planting seeds of environmentalism in children for the future. And that's not something that you can show very well on a piece of paper, but it's incredibly important.
Yeah,
so,
you can't really count the carbon that generation that you've saved, or
exactly.
I mean what the term is for it, but yeah, whereas like clearly what you're doing is really important.
Yeah, definitely. And like, it's not as clear cut as a lot of the other green funding is. It's not carbon reduction, energy reduction, or carbon capture, anything like that. It's not so concrete, but it is absolutely pivotal if we're going to have a generation of environmental stewards in our country. It's crucial. We all know that the climate crisis isn't going away overnight, so it's only going to be more and more important. So it is partly from the funding aspect that there's less out there for small charities that are trying to expand into bigger ones. But also it's just, it's tough really with the schools getting on board. There's such a demand for it. That's not so much of a problem. If anything, we would just love to promote more and more to further schools. Because it would be great if we could expand and have more staff members to put on the events. But I mean, at the moment, we've had like a 75% increase in demand just since 2022. So it's only going to go up at this point. We just want to make it meet it.
You're doing a crowdfunder at the moment. Tell me a little bit about it.
We are. It's really exciting. It launches on Monday. We're trying to raise £10,000 to go towards our education program for this academic year. All of the funding is going to go straight towards that, whether it's through our virtual multi-school events or sponsoring Explorer Talks for the children or doing interactive workshops. It will all be a part of it. It's a really interesting crowdfunder because we're working with Aviva as well, and they are match funding all of the donations up to £250. So what we're trying to tell people is if you've ever contemplated donating to a climate change education charity now is a wonderful time because it has double the impact. And we even have a couple of rewards on our crowdfunded page. So there might be a couple of things that you might be able to get as well. For example, sponsorship of a talk, or free educational resources that you can give to your children or your school. So it's a really exciting time.
Can I just highlight that that means if you've got match funding, that means, am I correct in thinking if somebody donates £100 plus gift aid is 125 plus match funding gets to 250. So if you donate £100, Wicked Weather Watch gets a donation of £250.
That's
or
exactly
if you
right.
donate £10, Wicked Weather Watch gets a donation of £25. So anyone listening, just
nudge,
help
nudge,
you with
wink,
your
wink.
fundraising.
Yeah, no, it's a really nice model, absolutely, because it's not just those big amounts that make a difference, it's all the small ones as well. And whether it's £5 or, like you said, 250, it all makes a huge difference because, you know, it's all part of it. So we're just grateful for anything that anyone wants to support.
Yeah. Do you, in terms of the going back to the challenge of the impact measurement, have you got any thoughts on how the funding community might be able to help with that? I mean, I don't know whether you've got any thoughts on what the Trust and Foundation community could do to make it easier for you, or do you think it's the Trust and Foundation, I mean, for starters, do they just need to be better educated in order to really understand the challenges that environmental challenges charities are facing?
Yeah, I think potentially that's definitely where I think it starts for sure. I think people need to understand that it's not as clear cut as just increasing biodiversity in your community. That's fantastic, but climate change isn't really so much of an action problem as a sharing of knowledge problem. It's a communication problem. And that's exactly what we do. What I always tell the children is all of the impacts that they make are fantastic and they have a real effect on our planet. One of the best things that they can do is to talk about climate change. Talk about climate change with their parents, with the community, with the schools. And then after that, we can all figure out some solutions together. So I really do think that that's going to be one of the starting points for sure. I've not seen lots of funding applications for outreach in particular. If anyone watching knows of them, please do let me know. But I do think it's part of it, which maybe goes down to the trusts and foundations in thinking about how we can show that impact, because obviously that means a lot, not only to the trusts and foundations, but also to the charity. So just maybe figuring that out, but it's all part of a learning process, isn't it?
Yeah. We are, as you know, but some people listening to this call might not know, so we are launching this autumn a ring-fenced environment and sustainability fund in order to try and counteract this situation where early stage grassroots charities working in this space are just finding it incredibly difficult to get a hold of support, even more so than your average small charity. Consequently, this won't look any different from the applicant side of the things, but it is for the funders. We are specifically trying to raise money from environmental funders and people are interested in supporting the environment and sustainability for these causes. But it's something that, we are really aware of. And one of the things that we will be trying to do as we build this collaborative fund is brainstorm both with charity leaders, and Rhianna, we will get you involved in this potentially if you're interested, and with other funders, is how can we help measure the impact of this particular kind of ring-fenced fund, and at the same time help you as individual organizations to have something that you can use. Now, it's not going to be fantastic yet, but as a sort of proxy for impact that will help you going out to show that, raising awareness and educating people on climate crisis is obviously in the long term going to reduce carbon emissions and improve improved adaptability and all of the things that we need to do. But yeah, we're trying to look at how we can address this ourselves. With what you are doing, do you think that in the longer term, where do you think that where you're going in the longer term is going to really, what's your strategy to really kind of move forward and to impact as many people as possible? What's your vision at the moment?
Yeah, so the vision right now is to expand staff members. That's number one for sure. But once we do that, it's just promoting the sessions that we do. It's making sure that we're not only, we've got obviously the Arctic and Antarctic Explorer events, we have virtual multi-school events that not only take children on a trip or a journey to the Arctic, as well as providing some sessions on plastic and how to make artwork out of plastic, stuff like that. So really, we want to expand the educational offerings that we provide as well. And when we have a bit more time, a bit more capacity to do that, I do think that there's a lot possible, because there's a lot that schools get in contact with me about, whether it's they're talking about transport in their curriculum, or they want to talk about low carbon food. Both of these things we've spoken to children about before, but being able to put on an event for it, I think would be wonderful. So just making sure that we can support schools more and more. There is also an opportunity for the future. So at the moment, we've got about 40 resources on our website that are absolutely free for teachers to use, because we want to reduce as many barriers as possible to gaining climate change education everywhere. So if teachers want to take our stuff and run, go for it. That's what we want. We want as many people to be involved as possible. So we want to increase the amount of resources we've got on our website, as well as providing training services for teachers so that they can be those environmental stewards in their schools as well.
Some people might say, well, clearly a financial model for your future could be to charge schools. What's your response to that? Because I mean, that's not a route that you're going down. And do you want to just answer that question?
Yeah, well, we do actually charge schools a very small amount depending on the sessions that they have from us. So at the moment, that's one of the benefits of the virtual multi-school events that we put on. They can be subsidized so that we can have more schools on board to reduce the barriers that makes sure that other schools can get involved. So we've put on sessions for disadvantaged schools for free a lot. That's what we get some funding for from trusts and foundations, which is great, because we're trying to remove any, whether it's financial or locational barriers possible. I don't think that it should go solely on the schools, that's for sure, because you end up isolating a lot of other schools that should have access to this education. Climate change education should be part of the primary school national curriculum. It's not at the moment. So it would be great if we could reduce the costs altogether for the schools, but obviously that's very difficult to do.
And in some ways, charging a little bit makes them value it, I can imagine.
Exactly. Yeah.
But that's a great response, is, you don't want to limit it to schools that are operating in situations where they're just a bit more, cash is a bit less tight. But it is, it's because we work with a lot of charities that work in schools, and I pose that question because a lot of them say they get asked it a lot, is why aren't you making the schools pay or pay more? But obviously school budgets are really tight. There are lots of really helpful, thank you for everyone who's put messages in the chat. We've got some great suggestions of places.
Thank you so much.
Funding, so hopefully that'll be helpful. If anyone wants to come on camera and ask a question, please do. But if you could have any platform at which to talk about what you're doing, or that you don't have to limit it to one, but what platforms would you love? Is it Royal Geographic Society to be able to give a lecture at that? What sort of places would you love to be able to talk about Wicked Weather Watch and what you're doing and the impact that it's having on the children?
Oh my goodness, what a question. I mean,
Sorry, I didn't prep you for that one in advance. I just thought about
no,
it.
that's okay. That's fine. Honestly, I think we're working a lot with Arctic organizations quite a bit, and that's kind of like what we do because we're an Arctic-based organization. But also, it would be
Yeah, we
great.
can see from your backdrop. Very
Yes,
Arctic.
I'm joined by a friend here today, my emotional support polar bear. No, I think it would be great to kind of get more people involved in any way, whether that's literally going on TV. We've done that before where we've explained the work that we do just to kind of have a bit more of that platform. It would be great to work with, you know, the Royal Geographical Society. We work with,
Are places like that interested in what you do? Do you, I mean, yeah, do
yeah,
they?
yeah, definitely. So we've worked with a couple before, absolutely, and there's definitely more opportunity for partnership when we have a bit more resource. Being able to put the time towards that is less on the priority list at the moment, but it's still so important. I think that there are lots of opportunities out there to do stuff like that. I mean, it would be great if we could work very much with researchers and scientists that go there and they could come and do like a
Yeah,
virtual call from the Arctic or from the Antarctic and explaining about their experience there in real time. I think that would be incredible.
that would be
Even,
amazing.
yeah, exactly.
Although, are you revealing that you're not actually in the Arctic at the moment?
Unfortunately not. No, this polar bear's been frozen to death, honestly. It's just frozen in place. Um, yeah, so I think stuff like that would be massive, and just being able to talk more about the work that we do and increase the amount of people we work with. We've just started partnering with STEM ambassadors as well. So increasing our volunteer base has been wonderful, and just making sure that we can have more capacity to meet that demand that we've got. So
Yeah. Well, for starters, when we put this on LinkedIn and a link to it, we'll hashtag Royal Geographic Society, and let us know if there are any other, if anyone is listening and would like to share it on their social media, please hashtag these sorts of.
thank you.
Adrian, hello.
Thanks. Yeah, I've just got one question. And I came into your talk just a couple of minutes after the start. I was at the point where you were saying that it's not scary and it's something to be excited about. And then later on you used the phrase reducing climate change. So my question really is that's interesting for me because, of course, I always come at this topic from a position of despair because there's so much damage going on, and I'm just wondering, number one, what is the reality? Have we gone beyond the tipping point, and is it now about damage limitation and reducing climate change, or is it still reversible and it's not just damage? Like things can remain the same, or have we gone beyond that? And then if we have gone beyond the tipping point and it's about damage limitation, how I'm just intrigued. It sounds like you're quite upbeat, which is great, what we need, and it sounds like you give an upbeat message to the children, but there's a bit of a dichotomy there, isn't it? If the message is, one level, we're beyond the tipping point and it's damage limitation, at the same time it's difficult to be completely upbeat because it's just about making things less bad, if you see what I mean. So I just intrigued on what the reality is and how you present it.
Yeah, definitely. No, what a great question. I mean, there is a bit of a dichotomy there for sure. The first thing I want to say is that I do think we've gone a little bit past where we should be at this point, and there is obviously lots of disappointment from my end that humanity hasn't done what it should have done already. I do think, though, we're not going to change anything if we're always thinking of the negative parts. We're already experiencing climate change day to day, really. I mean, the UK, just as itself, has experienced so many record-breaking summers. We've had forest fires in Siberia. Like, it's happening now. I don't think that there's a point of turning back to what it used to be. This is something that's been in in progress for a really long time. But at the same time, I do think it's incredibly important, especially when we're talking to children, to inspire them, get them excited about learning about it, connect them to nature, because through that, they will have the fire in their belly to really do something about it. I don't think we're going to get very far if we go into schools and explain that it's all really bad. I won't lie to them either, though. If they ask me the question, is it bad? I will say it's not great. No, it's not, because I don't think that that's right either. So it is a real balancing act into making sure that you're speaking sensitively enough and gently enough to children when it is a really scary situation. I think anyone, whether you're a kid or an adult, a young adult, older adult, whatever your age, everyone should be scared because it's a really scary situation. But we're not going to do anything with that. So it's kind of using the fear in a way and the excitement that you can get involved and do something every single day, if not multiple things, to help combat it in any way that you can. I think really, from my point of view, it's kind of the only way to move forward.
Yeah,
Thanks,
that's helpful. Thank you.
Adrian, thank you. That's a great question. Susanna, you've put a really interesting comment into the chat. I wonder if you'd like to come on camera and bring it to the rest of the group, because thank you.
Hello, thanks for that invitation. Yeah, so I'm working on the coast and I'm working with communities who are at risk of coastal erosion or coastal flooding. And it is hugely challenging, and the natural instinct is to try and find some kind of balance between, you know, should I be worried? Hell yes. Or no, I'm complacent, you know, I've got to deal with other things. And the kind of work that I'm doing also requires a really long time scale, because you can't sort of sort out coastal defences or improve salt marshes just quickly.
Yeah.
So we've got a multitude of challenges, and we did some work with University College London and some behavioural scientists there that really helped me. And working with them, they helped explain how the brain works. And effectively, the more you talk about catastrophe and crisis, you have different responses from different types of people. But some people just simply, it's too hard to cope with. And they either close down, which leads to no engagement, which gets us nowhere, or even worse, they turn into deniers, climate deniers. And the answer that these behavioural scientists had for us was always link if you can, create storytelling and link to stories of action and stories of hope. Don't run away from the challenges. So you can have a hero going on a journey and fighting all the dragons and talk about all of those parts of the story, and whatever field we're in, there is always plenty of that to talk about.
Yeah.
But then show that action is happening, because there is a lot of stuff happening. And as soon as people understand those actions, they then think they can take a step, and one step leads to another step, and that leads to people feeling empowered. And then they feel that it's not something to turn away from, it's something they can engage and work with. And so since I've sort of heard this message, I've found that really useful in all the work that I do. And I talk about my main work being on the coast, but I'm also deeply involved in curlew conservation. And actually, when I'm trying to do social media around curlew conservation, and basically most breeding attempts end in failure, it's really hard about how do you talk about this as a curlew conservationist? But actually, all you do is talk about what the field workers are doing, because then you can actually simplify your whole social media plan to just, let's talk about the actions we're taking, because that immediately starts turning into stories, and you can talk about how the field workers are overcoming challenges, the stuff that you've been doing, and, you know, always focusing on the action to help people feel hope has been what I have found a really useful experience. And thank you for the offer to speak.
That was wonderful. Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, what a great piece of advice as well about how to work with creating hope. I think you're absolutely right. And an example of how we've done that, actually, now that you said, I was thinking at the end of all of our sessions, we always ask the children to write down what they'd like to do to reduce their carbon footprint. And what's really worked with the schools that we've worked with is the children writing that down and then the teachers putting it somewhere in the school, whether it's in the classroom or in the school hall for other students to see as well. And then 2 months down the line, we ask them, where are you at? Like we will keep that accountability with them. And for them to say, oh, we did as a class or as a school, turn off the lights every time we left the building or the classroom, or we did actually, you know, all eat plant-based this week because we had meatless Mondays. And all of these different actions really do, just like you said, create those steps to hopefulness and those steps ultimately to empowerment as well. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Well, thank you for your presentation. Absolutely brilliant, and I'm cheering you on and really wish you success. I did to share the story of the work I was doing. I did an interview with one of these behavioral scientists. I'll try and dig out the link, because a little YouTube link, and I'll put that in the chat when I find it.
Thank you. That'd be great.
Susanna, I was going to ask for just that, or if there's a link to any research that's actually been published on this. Yeah. It'd be so fascinating to have that, and then we could share that.
Link to the interview I did, and then you'll have the contact with the researcher that I was.
Brilliant. Yeah,
perfect.
I think that it's so relevant, not just for this as a cause, but for, you know, almost all of the organisations that we're backing. I think that you know, not catastrophizing, basically, because catastrophizing doesn't get you anywhere. I think it's something that resonates with me very strongly, what you're both saying there about hope, not sort of don't try and terrorize people into getting involved. And one of the things that we notice when we host events is that there's an incredible energy in the room. Because we've got so many leaders from non-profit charities and social enterprises that we're working with. And I think that a lot of that energy comes from the fact that if you are working in this space, you are people who fundamentally believe that we can change things. And that is extremely positive, and it breeds a hugely dynamic atmosphere that is utterly contagious. You know, you can be an incredibly cynical person, but if you walk into a room that is full of people who believe that it is possible to change things, then, you know, you can't help but be infected by it in a really positive way.
Absolutely.
We've had another couple of messages in the chat. One of them from Nadine saying that she's working in Devon and she's just registered for your resources. So
hey!
Thanking you for that. Tom McPherson at the Making Rooms has mentioned that he's focusing on opportunities such as helping artists to make their practice more sustainable, and that they are selling recycled coasters. He's working with a 12-year-old brother and sister who are making that lovely story.
Wow, that's amazing.
Was there somebody who just came on wanting to ask a question and then went off again while I was or not? That person just waiting, but I wanted to ask you about, Rhianna, what you felt. I interviewed somebody called Isla who set up Grow Cardiff, which is about putting community gardens and edible playgrounds into spaces like GP surgeries and schools, and I remember her talking about something that she had noticed, which is that there is so much talk about how we are going to have a green sustainable economy, and we need to have a green sustainable economy, but she was very concerned about the fact that we are not training children to have the skills needed to take up green jobs in future. Do you have any thoughts on this as being an issue? And I mean, you are clearly creating green activists, but in terms of what's going to be needed from skills, do you feel that the curriculum is supporting children with that?
I think there's definitely some work to be done, for sure. I think that there's a lot of green industries and green jobs that aren't even created yet. So I think we have to constantly be checking and double checking and making sure that everything in the curriculum is for that. I think that there's a lot of work to be done in the primary school curriculum. Personally, I think so. But
yeah, I mean, I have to say, I didn't realize that climate wasn't on the primary school curriculum.
yeah, I mean, that's kind of why we sneak ourselves in there a little bit because in the primary school curriculum, you'll often talk about Arctic, Antarctic explorers. So it's kind of our way of getting in there while we can. If you're going to talk about the polar regions, you have to talk about the impact that they're having from climate change and how sea ice is melting, glacial ice is melting. It's all really important for thermoregulation of our Earth. I mean, the Arctic in of itself is warming at a rate 4 times faster than the rest of the world. And that's just incredible. So we need to be talking about it, absolutely. And I do think that there's a lot of work to be done in that respect, for sure.
Do you, if there was one change that you could make tomorrow in terms of, you know, all of the work that you're doing and how it could make it easier for you, what change would you like to see?
Oh my goodness.
That's a very difficult question, sorry.
Yeah, I think, you know, I'm torn between just having climate change be part of the curriculum in all aspects and having teachers feel like they are trained enough to speak about it. I think that would be wonderful. It maybe would make Wicked Weather Watch at least a little bit redundant in the future, but honestly, if we've all got the same goal here. And the other thing I would say that's equally on par is that there's just a possibility, like for the 4, to have trusts and foundations think a little bit more about the needs of small charities and making sure that there's unrestricted funding towards growth and transition in an organization. I think that would solve a lot of the problems that we're having now as a charity. But at the end of the day, the main aim here is climate change education for children. So as long as we do that in any way, shape, or form, I think that that's what we're looking for.
Do you think one of the reasons why you are in such demand in schools is because teachers want to educate their pupils about the issue, but they are a bit scared to go there themselves? Because
absolutely, yeah. So 90% of all teachers, all primary school teachers, want compulsory climate change education. About 97, I think it is, percent of all of the teachers that we've ever worked with would recommend our services to another school. The demand is there because we can do it well, but also a lot of teachers, like you said, are not sure what to say. They're not trained in it. They don't know how to not scare the kids while also giving them the facts, which can be tricky. Of course it can. It's a very sensitive subject. And so poor teachers already have so much on their plate. They're already so thinly spread, especially post-COVID, during COVID. It was very, very difficult. I think that they want to be involved in any way they can, but that's why we offer our services, to kind of reduce that load on teachers. But that's also why we would love to be able to provide more teacher training to primary school teachers across the country. That would be ideal.
Tell us a little bit about your models at the moment for teaching teachers, the train the trainer.
So we did have some CPD available just before COVID really took off, and it was very well received. But during COVID, we had a couple of sessions booked, and it wasn't a priority for them, which is fair enough, as it wouldn't be. So we're just trying to bring that back, see what the demand would be like if we were to teach more teachers about climate change and make sure that they've got the skills to be able to tackle those really difficult questions from the children that ultimately they will receive at some point, I'm sure.
Gemma Smith, thank you for your comments in the chat. She's highlighting that, which is essentially agreeing with exactly what you're saying, but the timetabling in schools is also really rigid. And it's really hard, and teachers are not measured on this type of education. They're measured in maths and English, so it's really, I can imagine it's really hard for them to prioritize it. Yeah, nice comment from Bex here with Nadine saying that she's just left teaching after 17 years and totally agree with the need to train teachers to deliver the facts. Gemma also mentions that it's primary rather than secondary, because yeah, it is on the secondary code curriculum,
Yes.
but I can imagine in some senses it's almost too late by the time children get to secondary school, in that by the time they're into their teens, they are, I mean, I don't know if there's been any research on this, but they're probably, their opinions about things are to a certain sense are less malleable and are more,
and I do think that the a good proportion of the anxiety is there by then. Whenever we go in, I'm talking to reception, year 1, year 2, all the way up to year 6 about it, and every single time I go into schools, I ask them, have you heard of climate change before, and what are your thoughts about it? They always put their hand up. There's always at least a handful of children that understand climate change and understand that it's a problem. So I do think by secondary school, it's a little late. Obviously, it's great to have it, but I think that primary school, that climate change education is definitely needed.
Yeah. Joshua Piercy, you've made a really interesting point. Would you like to just come on the last one before time we've got, I think probably before we finish?
Sure, yeah. Thank you for the invite. So sort of in my professional capacity, I've been working a lot with someone from Kent County Council who is responsible for kind of embedding the kind of a greener schools agenda. And they're doing fantastic work, but like the requirement for, for primary and secondary schools to have, a climate action plan and a sustainability plan, all that sort of stuff by the end of 2025, all that stuff is really like teacher driven. They basically say, you've got to do this by the end of the year. And there are some resources if you look on that website, right? But like, I can't imagine the pressures of being nominated as like climate lead and sustainability team lead in your primary school while still having to do all the same stuff you had to do 5 minutes before you were nominated into that post. And so I was wondering, like, I guess the question is, you've actually spoken a little bit about sort of like quick wins already, and like in responses to other questions. But I wondered if there were any ones that you've got a list in the back of your mind of like, you could do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, without really like requiring huge amounts of intellectual resources for institutions. Like, do you have any suggestions in that regard about like things you can do on day, like, I've just been nominated as sustainability lead for my primary school, and I've got until the back end of next year to come up with this action plan. Like, what can I do to make that feel less completely overwhelming and terrifying? Because it's great that the kids have got this, more positive mentality, and that's amazing. But for adults that are maybe already a bit drained on the subject, right? And have had this kind of like torrent of overwhelming information for like, I'm an elder millennial, right? So I remember like Captain Planet told me this was a really serious problem when I was like 5 or 6. And the needle hasn't moved in the way that I was kind of 6-year-old me was sort of expecting that it would. So yeah, what are your kind of quick wins for like day one for education providers?
Yeah, definitely. We've actually got one of the resources on our website is a school's climate action plan. So
okay,
I'll just plug that.
Here's one I made earlier.
As soon as this meeting is over, I'm going to start sharing that with like 20 people. So that's
please do. I mean, I'll put our website in the chat here. Oh, I didn't put the www. Sorry, but that's the website. It's a very unique name, so if you just search Wicked Weather Watch, will come up. But there's loads of resources on there. I mean, there's lots of things. One of the main things that you could do is definitely to do like an energy audit. There are lots of organizations that can help you with that, Energy Sparks being one of them. That is really where you should start first, because you don't know what you don't know. So knowing how much energy you're using is a really good place to start. And you can get the children involved in that so easily. Like I say, that Pester Power, it works wonders. It really does, in the school in particular. Talking to the catering staff maybe about having more plant-based alternatives. Like, there are so many different things that you can do for sure. Even just like taking turning the lights off. There are so many schools that keep the lights on overnight or during holidays, which just feels like, come on, we gotta start working now. Let's use our brains here. So there's quite a few things, but I'll definitely ask you to look on the website. You'll find the school's climate action program.
Right.
It's like a big pack, so all the information that you could possibly need should be in there. If
Brilliant.
you need to send me a message.
And thank you so much. And yeah, thank you for all of this. It's been really inspiring. So cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joshua. That was great. And Rhianna, we've had another comment asking if you've worked with youth centres and offering Tom McPherson, thank you, McPherson Pope, for connect you with 15 that are out there. We are coming up to the end. So I just wanted to, from my perspective, say, is there anything that you'd like to just remind people of? Obviously, the crowdfunder, make sure that you put that link, and we'll circulate that when we circulate the message about this talk on our socials too. But is there anything else you'd just like to say before we finish, and before I just want to say thank you, basically?
Oh, that's very nice. Thank you for having me. I mean, it's been wonderful being able to speak to so many people that are obviously so clearly passionate about the same thing. So it's really wonderful. Honestly, obviously that crowdfunder is really important to us, so we can continue to do the work that we're doing. You'll see it on our website. It will be a big flashing button, I'm sure. On Monday it starts, so please do check it out. Other than that, like, there are always lots of different ways to support, and whether you can do that financially or not, even just promoting the work that we do, sharing some social posts, it makes a huge difference. And just, think about us. If you've got a primary school nearby that you think would benefit from the work that we do, I just appreciate it if you thought about us. So, I mean, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much. I've had a wonderful time.
It's an absolute pleasure to talk to you, Rhianna. Thank you so much. I'm so proud of the fact that you're managing to do so much with so little. It's amazing. And we are, as a world, very grateful for the work you're doing. So thank
you.
We'll share, and I hope everyone else, well, I know everyone else, having heard you, will also be sharing what they can to spread the word. Have a lovely afternoon. Enjoy your Friday. And thank you very much, everyone, for your great questions and for listening. And have a lovely weekend.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.